Hey, welcome in Vertical Pursuit. Mike Barrett, Mike Tatlock. Sorry, I didn't tell you we were starting. We just kind of started. It's been a while, and that's how summers go, especially for people in your profession. Can I call that a profession? If I should say that, I guess. But you've been around a lot, and there's a whole bunch of stuff I want to get to, and maybe we'll get to some of it in this episode, and maybe some in the next one. But kind of a crazy summer so far for a lot of reasons, not just personally, but nationally. We'll get to some of that internationally. But I want you, because you talked about this at church when you preached last week. You talked a little bit about an NBA Summer League is something I went to for a long time. In the old days, it was in Salt Lake City, and it was a private deal. It was the Rocky Mountain Review. It was not the NBA. Then they moved it to Vegas, and then the NBA took it over, and we used to broadcast games from Summer League. And then we did a couple of years where we broadcasted them from studio in Portland, but it's called a backbench feed. It's how they do a lot of F1 racing. It's how they do the Olympics. Oh, yeah. A lot of the Olympic stuff is not broadcast on site. Right. Some of it is. Most of it, the guys are in a studio a million miles away. Yeah. And it just seems like it. So that's how we did Summer League. And then, Summer League was always interesting. I was always there for too many days. And you're in Vegas. I was in there for like 13 days one time. But your experience was different, and it was very recent. Yeah. But talk about how amazing, because you're the NBA team chaplain for the Portland Trail Blazers, and every team, as we've talked about on past episodes, has a chaplain, and you guys get together, I know, at All-Star break, and probably the only other time you see them in person is probably Summer League, correct?
Yep.
How was that?
It was great. It's funny, because the first time we did this was, I remember going to Summer League when I was a kid. We lived in California. And it used to be at Loyola Marymount.
Oh, yeah, Loyola.
Back in the day.
Yes.
Summer League was, and my uncle would take me in when I was like probably in the 4th grade, 5th grade, and you'd go to Loyola Marymount, Hank Gathers, back in that day. Oh, yeah. And you'd pay like, I don't know, $10 or $15. And it was just rush seating. It was like going to a high school game. Yeah. You would go sit down at the bleachers, and you were there for the day, as many games as they played. And the athletes, the players, they would just sit in the stands. It was literally like going to a high school tournament, right? Yeah. Now you fast forward, they took it to Vegas, and it's a much bigger, in the Thomas Mack Arena. And
it wasn't always that way, because when they first went to Vegas, it was in their secondary gym.
Oh, what?
The small gym.
Oh, the small one.
And that's where it was. It only was like the 3rd or 4th or 5th year in Vegas did they move it. They had a combination. They had it in Thomas and Mack, and they had it in the small gym at the same time. And then now I guess it's all in Thomas and Mack?
Yeah, it's all in Thomas Mack. They have that auxiliary gym. I do think
that's where it used to be.
Wow.
Like exclusively. And that was like a junior college
gym.
Yeah,
like a JC. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, they might still use it for some other games, but the main games are in the Thomas and Mack Arena, and you're assigned your seat and all that, like you go to any game. But I'll never forget, you'll get a crack out of this. The first year I went to Summer League was with Myers Leonard. Uh-huh. And you guys remember Myers was on here on the show, and him and Ellie were engaged. And so the plan was we went down there and we did some of their premarital in Vegas.
Oh, that's a great place to do it.
It was awesome. It was, we stayed in the same hotel. We met in the lobby, had lunch, and talked marriage plans, wedding plans, all that kind of stuff. And that was the beginning of us going down. And, Bern loves to sit by the pool and just kind of sit and get some rays down there in the sun. But what was funny was that same first year, I was sitting in the bleachers behind the Blazers bench and waiting for Myers to come over, and we were going to sit together. Well, I ended up sitting next to Neil O'Shea, who at the time was the general manager. Uh-huh. And Neil knew I was the chaplain, but he was always nice to me, but we never had a long conversation. And so I'm sitting next to Neil. He's on my left, and I'll never forget. He looks at me and he goes, "Do chaplains come to Vegas?"
Like you're in Nineveh.
Yeah, like I'm in Nineveh. Exactly. Sodom and Gomorrah.
Right.
I said, yeah. I said, I'm here to gamble it all away.
Right.
And he laughed. And then it's just been this tradition. And then
took the offering plate down there and double the money for the church.
Come on, we need a new building.
Put it all on roulette.
Yeah. he got a kick out of that. But then we've just been going pretty consistently. There's probably been 2 or 3 years there. Obviously, COVID was probably a 4th year in there that we missed, but It's a little bit more chill. Players have a little bit more downtime. But since then, this to what you brought up, what happened a couple of weeks ago was the chaplains, and I don't lead this. There's Damon Gunn. I just want to give a shout out to him. He's the Houston Rockets chaplain. He does a great job of coordinating with the NBA chaplains. So when we meet up at All-Star Weekend, yes, we go to the game, but it's a ministry weekend. It's an outreach. We're in prisons. We're doing events in schools, whatever, on the side because the players are there. So what a great opportunity for some of the Christian players to say, hey, join us in the prison and share your testimony. Join us at this school, share your testimony. So there's a really cool opportunity. Well, because of Summer League, there's so many athletes there, it's turned into the other gathering of the chaplains. And so we were down there. Again, we do prison work, and so they found a corrections facility for younger. These are young adults that are in there for different. You could tell some of them are like straight out of gangs, all tatted up, and they're like 18 years old, and you're like, I'm sure they were in gangs since they were in diapers for some of them. So you can just imagine some of these kids have pretty rough life, but that was pretty cool. So you go into this corrections facility and guys are sharing testimonies. Pro players are with us telling their story and giving the invitation, letting kids hear the gospel and letting them know that, God's in the business of second, third, fourth, fifth chances, And then we did an event in a gym at a school, and we invited the whole community, worked with organizations that provide food and things like that. And it was a packed gym. And I think that night we had maybe 6 or 7 pro athletes tell their testimonies and stories. The Phoenix Suns mascot and their acrobat team was there, doing all kinds of that kind of stuff. Gave a gospel message, and tons of people came forward to find hope. So it was really cool.
Huh. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Because you shared some of that at church, but I just wanted you to share a little bit more of that here. Because I never saw that side of Summer League, because we were always broadcasting games or doing feature stories or, when the season starts, and I don't pay that much attention to it anymore. I pay attention from your standpoint, but Summer League was fun. It was fun. It was different.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's much more low key. A lot of guys who are playing in it will never play in the NBA.
Yep.
It's a lot of your draft picks.
Yep.
A lot of guys who may find their way onto a roster.
Yep.
But it is a who's who of scouts, presidents, general managers, even owners who are in the stands, which is really weird.
Yeah.
I remember Paul Allen used to go, and he'd show up in Vegas and sit courtside and watch the draft. He loved the draft and loved the young guys. So he'd go and watch a lot of Summer League stuff. And it didn't used to be organized into a tournament format like it is now. It just used to be games. And that was back in the day. And then they decided to kind of make it competitive with having it be more of a tournament. But the games used to be spaced out. We'd have 3 days between games.
Oh,
so it was just like down there
That's
doing
a lot
nothing,
of downtime.
just walking around and trying to get air conditioning.
Yeah.
And so it was fun, but I'm kind of good. I told my wife we can go back, sometime to Vegas and we haven't been, but I went down there for the baseball winter meetings a few years ago.
Oh, that's right.
Now
You
that
did
I'm
do
working
that,
for the Major League Baseball project, still am. And we had winter meetings there, and that was cool. But if there's a reason to go down there, and you made a Vegas trip, and I guess that's kind of one of the reason I wanted you to bring it up, because what a positive experience for a Vegas trip when so many of them are not.
Yeah.
And there's so many obvious stories I was reading, I got on social media a while back, and I was listening to, there was some algorithm I got into involving Vegas and like horror stories of people who've just lost it all.
Yeah.
And in fact, I know a guy who went down there I was on a work trip. It was, and I don't even want to get into what it was, because I'm sure people in this area kind of remember the story, but a friend of mine was with him, and they went in as a group. They were going to have 3 days of meetings. It was one of those things, like a regional type conference, and walked into the hotel. This guy was with him, had their bags straight from the plane, and they're walking through the casino. And the guy said, "Oh," he said, "craps. I'm gonna roll one quick can of craps, and I'll be upstairs, and I'll see you at the afternoon lunch, dinner, reception, and the next 2 days of the meeting." Well, this guy goes up, showers, goes to the meetings, everything. The guy's not there. Then he goes off to a dinner with somebody else. Gets up the next morning, goes down to get breakfast. The guy is still standing at the craps table.
Jeez.
Had never gone to his room, still had his bag at his feet,
No way.
and had lost everything.
Oh my God.
His house, everything. Gets home, he leaves the conference early, flies back, and goes to play golf with buddies 3 days later, and they were saying like he was throwing up, and it was really weird. Walked off a golf course, drove out to a field, and shot himself. How crazy is that?
Wow.
I mean, I'm sorry to bring you down on that Vegas story, but that's what I was on the other day. So my point is, we hear all those kinds of stories about the nightmares of Vegas, and then I hear yours. Yeah. So it's completely different.
One of the pastors down there, that is a pastor. He's a pastor that is in Vegas, has a little church down there. His dad played the NBA. I'm trying to remember who his dad was. His dad was an all-star back in the day. I can't remember who it was, but I was like, wow. And he made the comment. He goes, "This is not Las Vegas. This is lost wages."
Oh yeah.
And he goes, "We as a church that's there." He goes, "Man, people come here and they lose their lives, and they say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. No, it follows you right back home, no matter what.
Your money stays in Vegas.
Yeah, exactly. Your soul left you, and it stays there, but that's it. Yeah, but it's, one of the cool things that happened, just as another side was I didn't say this earlier, and I wasn't going to say this at church, but this last year was really cool. We have team chapels, and one Sunday night I go into chapel, and one of our players goes, "Hey, Mike, my girlfriend went to your church this morning." I said, "What?" I go, "What? Okay, tell me about that." He goes, "Yeah, they live in Wilsonville," and he said, "We've been looking for a church." And she, guys are busy a lot on Sundays, so she's kind of doing scouting, and then she can kind of come home and give the report. And he said, yeah, she came home, and she's like, "I found this great church." And he goes, "Which one?" And she says the name, and he goes, "That's Mike's church, our chapel and stuff." And so they've been coming. His schedule's different, but she's been coming pretty faithfully. She's become actually really good friends with my daughter, Micaiah. They go hang out. Well, anyways, the reason I say that is I'm in Vegas, and they invited all the chaplains to a meeting, a luncheon. And while we're in this luncheon, they're going to have a panel of parents in the NBA from different players talking from a parent standpoint. These are all Christian parents talking about their Christian son who's an athlete playing the NBA and what's been the struggles they've seen as a parent. And so I'm listening to this, and I'm listening to one of the panel guests, and I know his last name. And then he says the name. I'm like, oh, he's the dad of the player for the Blazers whose girlfriend's been coming to our church. I'm like, oh, I got to meet him. I haven't met him yet. So the whole thing gets done. I walk up to him afterwards. I introduce myself. "Hey, I'm Mike. I'm the chaplain for the Blazers." And I said, "I got to know your son this year." And he holds my hand. He goes, "Thank you so much for what you've done. We've been hearing all about it all season." He goes, "And the dad says, we can't wait this summer to come visit your church."
Wow.
And so that was a fun, out of nowhere connection down in Vegas by just God orchestrating.
I was just going to say, you just took I used to think that stuff was coincidence, and I would always say a random meeting with so-and-so, and then you watch how it blossoms, and you have to get to, I just did a long devotion the last couple weeks on discernment. You have to get to the point after a while where your discernment radar is up to where you see some of those things and realize they aren't chance meetings.
No chance.
It's crazy. It really is. And I thinking about Summer League again, and I always liked it because that's when they would take oftentimes an assistant coach on the staff, and then he would be the head coach of the Summer League team.
Yeah, that's right.
And I thought it was great, but I also felt bad for them at times because they're trying to take a group of players that you want them to play as a team, but these guys are also trying to showcase themselves. Yeah. So how selfless are they going to be?
Right.
And that kind of leads me into, because my dad was a coach, as we've talked about, and you played in college, and then now with the NBA, and me working in the NBA, and you'll see where I'm going with this in a second, but I kind of want to set you up for something that I want you to weigh in on today. And it has a lot of different branches that we can go off into, but you know, the best coaches that I've ever been around, and I was around a lot of them, NBA, college, whatever, but especially in my years with the Blazers, but they weren't the coaches that necessarily had the best offensive plan or scheme or even talent, you know, or defense. It's the coaches who can get the players on their team to accept their roles. And that is, and I know that goes in business and everything else, but in my, in what we're talking about now, we're talking about something that is a cohesive unit that leads to efficiency and synchronicity. It helps park ego, pride, immaturity, jealousy, etc. So it is amazing to me when I think of it from a coaching standpoint on role acceptance. And you talk about the ability to communicate and the feedback and the recognition and all of these things that these coaches have, self-awareness and autonomy, and how much autonomy they give their players, which refers to a degree of independence and control that their players can have. So we talk about the other term we used to throw around a lot and that always got talked about a lot from this standpoint, especially when you have a team that's really talented, is chemistry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the proper chemistry creates the proper culture, and there's a whole nother word. So lines you always talked about were the team or franchise. Oh, you say that team has great culture. And what does that start with? It starts with role clarity. And so in looking at a marriage, a group of friends, a company, a sports team, and you ask the questions of, especially as it relates to a company or something, why is that company so unhealthy? Why is that team so unhealthy? Why doesn't it work? Why is there confusion? Why is there frustration? Why have they lost their way? It's because they have an unhealthy role acceptance among the group. So if you're somebody, who is even a spiritual being who wants chaos, stress, suffering, destruction, wouldn't one of the first areas you would want to attack be roles, even societal roles, roles in the family, roles in government, even gender roles? And you'd equip a like-minded information, public relations group or media to fuel the destructive fire for you, causing further destruction. And so then what you've basically done is you have established, okay, put it this way. If you're an NBA coach and you're 52 games into an 82-game season, this would be akin to you walking in the locker room before a game and burning the playbook and saying, tonight, you guys just do whatever you want. Point guard, you go play center. Center, I don't care what you do. Just go. If you feel like dribbling, fine. If not, just carry the ball around. Doesn't matter. So my point is, if you were somebody who wanted to quickly destroy a team, a relationship, a friend group, a marriage, wouldn't that be the best way? And what would so quickly follow that, as we're seeing now? Confusion, anger, dissent, anarchy, all because your definition of roles and your application of roles in your various team, in your society, become confused, cloudy, and backwards.
You set that up perfectly.
Well, no, because you and I talked about the other day, you know, kind of this topic, how it relates to, and you're getting asked by a lot of guys, what is my role as a father? What is my role as a husband? And do I have what it takes? And how do I do that? And how do I organize that? How do I hold those thoughts captive? How do I game plan for a day when I come home and I know my wife has had a tough day and she comes home from work or whatever the case may be? Or you have a child that's being rebellious. Okay, what's your game plan? And then what are the roles to carrying that game plan out? Because when things are great, you don't really worry that much about role acceptance. But usually things are great because you have a healthy role acceptance.
Exactly.
So
Absolutely.
does that help set up any of that for you?
Yeah, absolutely. All the time. I mean, I think the role piece is, everybody who runs a company knows that. Running churches knows that. And the chemistry piece, when there's lack of clarity, that leads to confusion. And so bringing this home plate into the roles of home life. So as you're listening to this, what is the role at home? Like, what does that mean to have good chemistry at home? One of the number one questions I get asked from guys, because most guys are out there going, man, I feel like I'm failing at X, Y, and Z. It's hard to know what you fail at when you don't know what your role is clarified to be. How do you know you're failing? I mean, based on what metric are you measuring that? And for a lot of guys who are like, man, I've never had somebody mentor me or model for me what it looks like to be a husband, a dad, father.
Correct.
You know, those sort of things. Okay, so here's the thing. I would say, and this just happened a week ago, I've been a pastor now since I was 21. And so, 20 some years. And the number one question I get asked by women, hands down, how do I get my husband to be a spiritual leader at home? And I mean, it's like, that's the question I hear nonstop. Then I get guys that are saying, I don't even know what that means. Like, how do I step up to that? And at the same time, I have to look at the women and go, what do you mean by that? Like, I mean, like you say, you want him to be a spiritual leader. Is that like he puts a little pulpit in the living room and he's preaching sermons, family time? Does that mean he has all the answers? What do you mean by a spiritual leader? I think I know what you mean, but you're actually talking about a role. That's what you're talking about. You're talking about a expectation of a role that you need. And then you got a lot of men who are going, I don't know what that role looks like. I don't know how to be coached into it. Like, what does that look like? And that's creating all kinds of disconnect in the home. And so let's unpack some of that. Let's unpack some of those expectations. And what I like to do is I like to start by going to the Garden of Eden. Because if you go to the Garden of Eden, you go where it all began. When God created man and woman, he created marriage. What was the expectation? And if you go to that and you read the story, it's pretty fascinating. So here is, God creates man first. There's an order to the role. He doesn't create both of them at the same time. He creates Adam, and then he looks at Adam and he says, here's your responsibilities. I want you to cultivate this. I want you to create. I want you to work. So this is why people think, hey, the curse of the garden is to work. No, God created us to work. God created us to contribute, to cultivate things. I think what God's, and this is not just me, this is what a lot of theologians believe, God created the Garden of Eden to expand, to grow. It was God's birthing place of civilization. And he creates Adam, but this is what's funny. He tells Adam, I want you to take care of this garden. And the way I want you to take care of it, I want you to like nurture it, cultivate it like a gardener. You think of a landscaper who's out there, take care of the ninth hole. Mm-hmm. You and I we've played some nice courses.
I love that.
There's nothing like going on a manicured course. Which, by the way, do you have a favorite course you've ever played?
That's a tough question.
You think about it.
I will. That's probably one you hadn't heard of. Probably Pine Canyon in Flagstaff, Arizona.
Ooh. Is that like a desert typical like?
No, it's a mountain course.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Just gorgeous.
Phenomenal.
So that's garden.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking like,
I've always been jealous of the guy riding the mower at
right.
7 a.m. on a fairway, making it perfect.
Exactly.
Love that idea.
Oh, totally. And you look at a groundskeeper that's out there. That's what God put in all of us as men. But then God says, it's not good for you to be alone. And then what he does, he creates woman out of the man. So there's an order, number one, number two. But the other assignment God gave to Adam is to protect the garden. Your job is to protect it. Why is that important? Because when you turn the page over and you see Satan shows up, he's in the tree tempting Eve with the fruit. And he says to Eve, hey, who told you couldn't be like God? Here's the fruit of the tree. If you eat it, you'll be like God. And it says that Eve ate the fruit. Well, you got to ask the question, where's Adam at? we're freaking Adam, dude. Where are you at right now, man? Were you? Because a lot of people think Eve was like out for some like stroll. Adam's like working, laboring, taking responsibility, and she wanders off, seduced by this serpent and tempting her. The verse says that when Eve ate the fruit, it literally says, and Adam was standing right next to her. The number one fail that Adam did was he didn't protect that moment.
Passive man.
Bro, what you should have done was cut the head off that snake. That was part of your assignment that God gave you, was to protect from evil, protect the garden. And you should have either, whether you killed the snake or not, you should have intervened, at least at a minimum, and said, hey, Eve, hold up. We ain't doing this. God told us to trust him. Well, he's silent and passive, and he stood there, and he watched it, and then he partook also. So then he joined in. What the funny thing is right after that, it says they went and hid. They knew instantly what they did, and they're hiding, right? And as the story goes, it says that God came and said, where is the man? It doesn't say, where are they? It doesn't say, where's man and woman. All it says is, when God's looking for him, he's looking for the man.
Because he's holding him responsible and accountable.
Yep. So I say that because you see a thread is that one of the responsibilities we have as dudes is to take responsibility for things. And that means even taking responsibility for your imperfections. Being responsible doesn't mean I'm perfect. Being responsible means I'm taking ownership of my mistakes and imperfections. But the reason I go back to that is God says, where's the man? Where's he at? And he's like, hey, why'd you let this happen? And then guess what he says? Adam's response to this is he goes, woman made me do it.
Yeah, it's her fault.
Yep. So he's like, not my responsibility. She did it. And then he has the audacity to say right after that, not only does he say, well, the woman did it, he says, the woman you gave me. Now he points the finger at God. Exactly. I'm like,
oh, we haven't changed.
How many of us can relate to that?
We have not changed one bit. So crazy.
It's her fault. And God, you made me marry her. It's all her fault.
Yeah, you're not innocent in this. You made her and put her here. She's flawed.
That's why I like the Bible. It's just so honest. It's just like, yep.
And it says, I mean, I'm joking around, but I read stuff like that, and I do think people like to think that we're so much more sophisticated now, and all we're just the same.
The same way.
Same as it ever was.
Yep. So we can take a few things from that passage and go, okay, what's the role of a husband? The role of a husband is to be responsible and cultivate, means to work, get a job. And, as a pastor, there's been different times when I've sat with men who, there's a difference. I want to be careful how I say this. There's a difference from someone who has a disability, different from someone who is going through something with health, or there's some legitimate reasons to not be employed. So I want to say that up front. Now that I've said that, there's ways that you can still contribute at home. And like I as a pastor, I've had situations where one guy is like, man, I sit at home. I don't do anything around the house. I don't do anything like this. I don't even try to do this or this or this or that. And you were created. My hard part is this for you is, as a man, you were created to create things. So do stuff around the house. Like, you can do what you can. You will feel more a sense of purpose when you're doing projects, doing something. Like, just if you're just watching TV all day, you're not living out.
Complaining that your wife doesn't respect you.
Exactly. That's all I'm saying is there's a lot of reasons to be unemployed that are legitimate, 100%. I'm just saying something dies off inside of you when you're not doing something productive. Like, again, do projects around the house, or contribute to something, volunteer at your church, or volunteer somewhere where like you're using your time. You're not just sitting around the house kind of mooching and watching TV 24/7 and the Bible calls that lazy. I know some people who are doing incredible stuff in between unemployments where they're, making a huge difference, meeting with people, calling people up, helping with stuff. It's awesome. So it makes you feel like you still have purpose and you have something inside, because if you don't have that, you won't respect yourself. And then others, your wife or your kids won't respect that. So use that time to invest in your family differently. There's a lot of things you can do productively, and you'll feel better about yourself, and then your spouse will respect you as well too.
So when you talk about guys being spiritual leaders, and
Yeah.
you started to get into that, and I know you brushed that.
Yeah.
What does that practically look like? I mean, because some guys are like, I don't know. Does that mean I pray before dinner?
Yeah.
And yes, of course,
sure.
you can start with that.
Yeah.
What else does it mean? How and I guess it depends on the how old your family is, how many kids you have, and whatnot. But what does it look like
Yeah.
to be a spiritual leader of a home if you are the dad?
One of the things I love, Mike, I see this in you, because I see you as a really great spiritual leader.
I got some work to do, but thanks.
Well, I know you well enough. And I'll give one example, because this is what I would say that you're good at. You can't lead others if you can't lead yourself. Spiritual leadership in the home starts with spiritually leading yourself. And what does that mean? That means when you get up in the morning, are you feeding yourself in the Word? You know, and that doesn't mean you got to do a 10-hour Bible study, but and you do this because you send me scripture all the time. You're like, oh, I'm checking this out. I read this, or I saw this on this video, or I saw this resource, or I read this devotional. And you probably, honestly, more than anybody, are sending me resources of like, hey, I just read this. I was reading this. I was listening to this podcast, this sermon. One of the things you do well, Mike, is you feed yourself spiritually. And if you can't feed other people unless you know how to feed yourself. And I've been a recipient of you sharing things. And I'm like, oh, man, that's so good. I needed to hear that. And so that's one thing you do really well. And so I tell guys, like, it starts as simply as get in the Word every day. Even again, you're going to miss days. I get that. But at least try to come up with some sort of discipline where you are 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes in the Word, reading something, reading a devotional, something like that.
And we've talked about this, and it's gotten a bad rap, rightly so, but I like social media for that way. I follow a ton of pastors, and even like on TikTok, and which I didn't, I wasn't a TikTok guy till, I don't know, but we've talked about it 8 months ago, a year ago. But I really like it because I like it from a spiritual standpoint, because my algorithm is such that I get these different guys who give a daily message, or somebody will pop on, and everybody does this, so I'm not acting like I'm the only one, but you'll get on there and a guy will give you a quick 1 minute thought of the day. Have you ever wondered why this? Or, well, let me show you where that's rooted in Scripture. And it totally educates. And I've gotten to the point where, and I've had friends where some of them are tracking along, some of them aren't really that interested, or they have a season where they're not. But I think you do get to a point, I certainly have, and I'm not a great reader. I'm just not. I never have been. And guys will give me a book, and I'm going to read that. I never do. I mean, I once in a while, yes, I will. I if it's your book, of course I'll. but I get to the point with other things and watching other sermons, and even like on YouTube, and there are so many good ones out there, where I have found myself now with a hunger to learn more.
Yeah, exactly.
And I wasn't always there because I didn't know how to interpret it, maybe, or I didn't know how to apply it. Now I'm to the point where I love hearing that. And then usually what I do is, if I hear them kick off a piece of Scripture, then I want to go find that, and I want to look to see around it.
Exactly.
What was the setting? What was going on? Who else was involved?
Yeah.
So I love that. And part of me is I like history. And maybe that's what has always driven that quest for being more educated in that. But I also, it makes me so happy when a friend who maybe is a new follower, or even just kind of thinking about it, when they'll send me something then that they maybe wouldn't have if I hadn't barraged them for a year with stuff.
Totally.
And then it's like, all right, dude, I get it here. But when I can see that light just start to go on, and that hunger in their heart start to be developed to where, man, this is cool. And we've talked about how the Bible is the first and most amazing hyperlinked book in the world.
Yeah.
Everything hyperlinks to something else in the Bible. It's crazy. And I've seen these guys that I've seen, like, I think it was Jordan Peterson
Yeah.
spoke on
Yeah.
it and then showed like
the rainbow
Yes,
of like
did-
lines and connections.
right. It did, like, put it out on a screen and did a visual of what connects to what. And as somebody added it up, I don't know how many thousands of hyperlinks there are in it. But when guys start to see that, and it isn't just, you know, I think for a lot of them grew up with a grandpa or an old man with a bony finger pointing it at him about church, and they're like, but to see them start to find it themselves and start to find a hunger for that and realize that it's not about what you didn't do.
Yep.
It's not, you know, you're not all these things, somebody else to criticize me, one other reason to feel bad about myself. It's not that.
Yeah.
Get into the part of it to where, and I say all this because when you do that and you get into the part to where you have a hunger for it, your role
Yes.
as a spiritual leader
it.
becomes so much easier. And all of a sudden it's autopilot.
Exactly. And that's why, you know, I'm using you as an example because when it comes to this question, what does it mean to be a spiritual leader? People need practical things. Don't get just theological, get practical. So feeding yourself, huge part of that. Are you praying? Number 3, you are intentional. Again, this is about feeding yourself, nurturing yourself, leading yourself, getting yourself involved in community with other men.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be a better spiritual leader at home because I'm purposely meeting with other men because they make me better.
And they hold me
And
accountable.
they hold me accountable. And so, again, you got to take responsibility for that. Again, this all comes back to taking responsibility for yourself before you even take responsibility for other people. And so you have to take that initiative. And it's hard sometimes and all that, but you do that all the time. You have surrounded yourself, Mike, with other godly men. And there's women in your relationships too, through friends with Shelly and others. So you get to hear even that person. But you surrounded yourself with men, and these are men that look up to you as well too. But you purposely do that. So again, you're in the Word. I know you pray because we talk about prayer requests and things we're praying for. You surround yourself with men intentionally that are making you better. This is all about leading yourself stuff. So I think there's some practical things where you got to feed yourself. You gotta spiritually lead yourself. Get yourself to, church, whatever. Do that for yourself because you'll be better to lead other people.
You know, it's funny I was kind of thinking biblically. I was saying, okay, and I was looking this stuff up a half an hour ago or so, just on the role of a Christian man or the role of a Christian dad or a Christian father. And I found, you already said it, but spiritual leader, loving husband, encourager, role model, dreamer, mentor, provider. And then you just talked about this, examine your role, your strengths and weaknesses, ask God for how you can nurture the areas where you're doing well and improve where you're not. And as you said too, God created you to embrace your role as a father, a husband, and a leader. And what's also interesting in this is I'm not only talking to my friend, I'm also talking to you as a pastor. And if you're looking in the Bible for, and you're held to a different standard, by the way, but if you're looking in the Bible for how to be as a follower and a brother, there's stuff in there, but sometimes you have to pick it apart. Not yours.
Yeah.
Yours is pretty well penciled out, especially if in 1 Timothy, it basically says your role, Pastor Tatlock, he must be, it's penciled out, must be faithful to his wife. He must exercise self-control, live wisely, have a good reputation. He must enjoy having guests in his home. He must be able to teach. He must not be a heavy drinker or be violent. He must be gentle, not quarrelsome, not love money. He must manage his own family well, having children who respect and obey him. For a man cannot manage his own house. If a man cannot manage his own household, how can he take care of God's church? So that your instruction book is black and white in the Bible, and it says
Job description's clear.
This is what it says you have to be held to, and this is what you have to do. So, I'm kind of jealous because, in a way, because there's no mystery there.
Yep.
You have marching orders.
Yeah.
And there's no other way to interpret that even. Where a lot of things you can read a parable and go, and right now in church we're going through a series on parables, which I love, but there's different ways to interpret parables sometimes. Yep. You go, what did he mean? I don't know. What was that? And what was that guy talking about? And this isn't that one of those things. No. In Timothy, it's like, and Paul's saying, dude, this is the way it is. Sorry. Yeah. If you're going to sign up for this, these are your rules.
Yep. And it's as clear as anything. I think the passage that to help men that speaks to our roles is the Ephesians 5. And it talks about how husbands are to love their wives. And so you got to piecemeal some of these versus just one passage, but that's a big one. I would say, somebody asked me one time, how do you define spiritual leadership? And I said, taking initiative, taking responsibility, taking initiative. Leadership is initiative and responsibility. Initiate. It doesn't mean being perfect. Doesn't mean having all the Bible answers. In fact, your wife might be smarter on the Bible than you. She might have more experience. She might have been walking with Jesus.
That's my case.
Yeah.
My wife's far better biblically educated than I am. Not even close.
And that's why some dudes are like, well, I can't be the da-da-da. And some wives, and it's like, no, listen, it has nothing to do with who's smarter, who has more knowledge. It comes down to these things. Who's going to take responsibility and who's going to initiate? And like, I'll give an example of initiating. What do you mean initiating? Well, Ephesians 5 says, husbands, love your wives the way that Jesus loves the church, and he died for the church. They're like, great. So part of my marching order, my role as a husband is to lay my life down for my family, for my wife.
Sure.
Well, okay, what does that mean other than just taking a bullet that we all go, yeah, okay, is that what it's saying? Yeah. It means this. I'm going to put my self-centeredness, my self-gratification, my self-serving, I have to die to that, has to die so I can serve my family. What does that look like? It means this. You're in a fight with your wife and it's all her fault. Let's just say it is. I'll give it to you.
Hypothetically speaking, that would never happen,
in
but
some bizarro third sort of reality world.
Now we're going to get in trouble.
Yeah. Let's say it's absolutely her fault. And you could sit back and gloat, and you can sit back and be all pity party and whine, and she deserves to come and apologize to me first. Yeah. Or you can die to your pride, die to your ego, die to your whatever. You could initiate the process of restoration by you approaching her and taking that initiative and saying, hey, I know we're off. Something happened. If you have something you got to apologize, own your part of it, and you initiate the process of forgiveness and restoration. That's an example of setting aside your preferences, your ego, dying to that to serve, because Jesus came and he gave his life. He served. And that's really the role that Adam was given in the garden, that men are given now. We talk about being a leader. How did Jesus lead? He led as a servant. He didn't come with entitlement.
Have to.
Yeah. And he didn't flex. He wasn't overbearing and controlling and domineering and barking orders. That's not leadership. We all know that. That's tyranny.
At a time when literally the biggest dog at the bowl would have a castle on a hill, marble with servants, and totally. That's what blew people's minds then.
Exactly.
And that's why I think some people looked at him and said, well, I'm not sure if I believe you're all that, because if you were, you'd be living up by that guy, having huge parties.
Yeah. This is how God comes?
Right.
In the slums?
Right.
He should be up on top of the hill in the mansion, penthouse.
Yep.
So I think like that's leadership, is being the one to die first. I'm going to initiate by going, and again, dudes will push back and say, well, but I'm right and this. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably true most of the time or half the time. But you're setting aside yourself for the better of somebody else to initiate that. I think another thing too, in taking initiative, that's a real simple one that I see you do every single Sunday. You're there before anybody else at church. And I hear this, a lot of wives, and again, this is stereotypical, because the shoe can be on the other foot too. But a lot of women are like, man, it's like dragging my husband to church. And I got to, convince him, and he wants to stay home and watch football, or he wants to go golfing or whatever. And I see you do this. That's why I'm going to kind of honor you again is that every Sunday you're there. And I'm not talking about staff and the worship team that are there. You're always the first person there, and you've got your seats marked out for you, your family, and all the guests, because you invite more people to church than anybody I know. You were there before anybody else is even at church, and you've got your chairs marked out, seats saved for your family and for your friends that you invite. And I go, I've never seen anybody do that. I've been a pastor for years. I've been to 1,000 churches. I've never seen anybody go, I'm going to get to church 20 minutes early, and I'm going to get a space set out for my family. And you set the priority. You've done that. I'm not saying you can't miss church. Don't hear that. We go on vacation. but you have modeled, and you take the initiative. I'm going to go, and it's a priority for us to go to church.
You know,
that's spiritual leadership.
But that's my favorite time. And I told my wife one time, because I drive her nuts a little bit because I want to leave so early. And she's great about it. But unfortunately, church is pretty close to our house. I get it. It isn't always easy for people. But one of my favorite times is getting there, and that's when I can talk to people. And that's when I can talk to dudes. I have a few minutes with you. I can check in with Jake Campbell, who's running the board, find out what's going on in his life. I can, you know, I mean, and that's I don't get that time during church. And what feeds me is what I want to do to feed others is have conversations, and wander a little bit, which I usually do so worship starts. And I'm in there my wife always laughs too, because I usually am in there for one song and then I kind of take off, and I don't go hide. I like going out into
it's a social time.
Yeah, by the coffee house. And I like hanging out and seeing people I haven't seen and finding out what's going on in their lives. And it's just, to me, that as much as I enjoy church, period, that's the part I enjoy the most.
It is about, it's the community, the people you're connecting with. But what's so good is you've modeled, again, we're talking about spiritual leadership. I'm putting a lot of feathers in your cap right now.
I'm not always,
but because I'm doing this on purpose in this podcast, because oftentimes
you're gonna tear me down in the next one.
Wait till the next one. I'm just gonna shred you on that one.
It's all right. I'd be okay with that.
But the reason I'm doing this is because here's what happens when I start talking about maybe the way I do spiritual leadership in my house. People go, "Well, that's because you're a pastor," and it's so dismissive. And I look at you and I go, every guy can relate to you, Mike. You're a man's man. And, you know, and by the way, you've had to juggle that with flying when you were working with the Blazers and trips. So you've still had to go, how do I figure out these priorities? And I understand it. We got jobs, we got responsibilities. It's not always easy. And you're trying to balance life, work, all that kind of stuff. But I think you're a good role model for people to look and go, what is spiritual leadership? That every man could look at you and go, man, I can do those things. And I know you're not perfect, but I'm not. That's not the point of this podcast. This podcast is to go, what are practical things that you can do to be a spiritual leader? You guys lead a small group at your home with your wife and other couples, and we were at your guys' small group a few weeks ago, and 5 people got baptized
in our hot tub.
In your hot tub, which was awesome. They're all people from your small group.
That was so great.
It was a blast. But I go, you and Shelly have created that. But that's another example of spiritual leadership, of creating in your home an experience where you and your wife could have spiritual conversations, going to church together, join a small group with your wife or girlfriend, because that's going to stimulate spiritual conversations that you're having together. That's an investment. That's spiritual leadership. I think the other thing when it comes to spiritual leadership is being willing to protect. So here's the thing. I figured it out after all these years. Why in the world is it the number one question that women ask me? How do I get my husband to lead spiritually? Why is that? Out of nowhere, it's the number one question. And I finally figured it out a couple years ago. Here's why. The number one felt need of every wife, the number one thing she wants, is safety and security. And nothing will bring her more safety and security than a man who loves Jesus. A man who's not perfect, that's not what we're saying, but he's intentional in his relationship for himself. Because then she knows, listen, my husband's not perfect, but if he's pursuing the Lord, if he's in the Word, he's praying, he's pursuing key relationships with other men, and it provides for her the greatest sense of security, knowing that my husband's probably in the best place. Why is that? Because he loves Jesus. And Because the safest place in the world is the Father's heart. A man who's chasing after the Father's heart will be the safest man that a woman, a daughter, could ever find herself around. And so I think that there's no safer place in the world than Jesus. And there's no safer place in the world than our Heavenly Father. Because he's a perfect father. He's not a deadbeat. He's not abandonment or abusive. And so when a woman says, I want to feel safe and secure, the closer that we as men get to the life of Jesus, becoming more like him, and we have the Father's heart in us, we become the safest place for her. And that's the number one thing they want. So spiritual leadership, just to shout out to men, they don't care if you have all the answers. That's not what it's about. It's not about being perfect. It's about failing forward with the desire to want to become better and more like Christ every day. And when she sees that happen in your life, man, not only does that make her feel so incredibly safe, because listen to this, the safer she feels, the more she'll give herself to you.
Absolutely.
You want more of her in whatever your guys' relationship, intimacy, and connection, make it a safer place for her. And nothing will become safer to her when you become more like Jesus. How do you become more like Jesus? Taking responsibility for your own discipleship, your own growth. And then as you're doing that, you're making decisions. You got to buy a house. What school should we send our kid to? And you go, hey, let's pray about that. You don't have to have some elaborate pontificating prayer. That's not what spiritual leadership is. It looks like this. Hey, babe, should we take this house? Should we get this loan? Hey, what school should we put our kid in? Let's take a moment. I'm going to lead us in a 10-second prayer. God, what school do you want our kid to go to? God, give us some wisdom on that. That's it. That just initiating that kind of prayer with your wife when you're trying to make those decisions will bless her. And that's initiating. That's taking responsibility for that. So those are like some examples, like real practically and even deeper, why it impacts her so much.
In our last, 10 minutes or so, although we can go as long as we want, but I brushed this earlier when I was kind of trying to set this up. I spoke of, and what's really interesting is to see a lot of the people that I follow, and not all of them are Christians, but to see a lot of them start to adopt Christian attitude based on what they're seeing in the world right now. And a lot of them are saying, a lot of guys who I wouldn't have thought, who I've been around, and be it whatever it is, talk shows, whatever, and we've spoken about this before, and now podcasts, have kind of gone, yeah, I'm starting to understand what these Christians have been talking about. That it means what I'm talking about is what I tried to set up was kind of spiritual warfare and what that has done to the roles in this world. And I know that the first place people think is you talk about roles, you talk about identity roles. And I mean, even at the Olympics, the big story today was, this
the boxer.
man boxer who dropped this female and then she quit.
She walked after one punch. She
goes,
I
can't do this.
Yep.
So anyway, that's all kicked that up again, and how the media won't cover that, and how nobody of any influence wants to touch that except for people who are have been speaking about how ridiculous this is. But again, I don't want to go too, I know you have a lot of thoughts on this, but in terms of, does it make sense what I said earlier about if you wanted to disrupt and destroy a culture and the chemistry of a society, wouldn't that be one of the first places you would attack?
Absolutely.
And I know I'm going to get called a guy here, but traditional roles.
Well, yeah. I wouldn't even I agree with you. It is traditional because it's biblical.
Correct. Thank you.
So, attack it all you want, but it is. And that's why I said we go back to the Garden of Eden. It was very, very clear. God created male. God created female, period. That's it. Two genders, man, woman. He gave them both unique ways of expressing, because it says that they were creating the garden. So I would say this way, they were equal in that they're image bearers of God. They both have equal footing when it comes to value, dignity, worth, respect, honor, all of that, of course. But we're different. We're equal in terms of value, dignity, honor. Bible talks about husbands, honor your wives. In fact, the Bible even says if you don't honor your wives, your prayers will be hindered. Because that's one way God says, listen, you're going to treat her disrespect. Let's see how I listen to you. And so God holds men to a high standard of the way we treat our wives. And yet, but God still says they're distinct roles. There's a way that God expresses himself through men uniquely and through women uniquely. And what the world wants to do is just blur all those lines and disrupt that. And we know this statistically. That the downfalls of societies, crime, education in terms of dropouts, even pregnancy rates and abortion, all of those have to do with the role of a father and the absence of a father. And I would say the same thing about with a healthy husband. And so you take that out of the picture.
You want to take a culture down, you take down the fathers.
Exactly. Take the fathers down. Take a culture down, start with that's why there's so much attack now on men, and there's so much attack now on genders. By the way, another reason there's an attack on genders is because, and we'll talk about this in another podcast, but God created humanity, male, female, because he wanted the world to see who he is. And so if Satan, the world, can distort genders, male and women, and what that looks like, Satan is ultimately trying to distort who God is and how we see God. So if we can confuse humanity, it leads to confusion of who God is. But we'll go deeper on that one in another podcast. But I think that's why you're seeing such an attack on the roles today. And that doesn't mean women can't be strong. And that it doesn't.
Oh my gosh, no!
And that's so ridiculous. That's not even what we're talking about.
And I know we qualify stuff.
Yeah.
We've said this before, and I watched my wife go through breast cancer and have 3 surgeries, including a hip replacement, all in like 4 months. And I was stunned and I thought I couldn't do that. So even physical strength and what she went through in that, we're not talking about that.
No.
It has nothing to do with this.
In fact,
so
I'll
don't
go
hear that.
even further is that when God looked in the Garden of Eden and looked at Adam and said, it's not good for him to be by himself, God says, I'm going to send a helper. That one's gotten us into trouble a lot. Because everybody's like, yeah, she can help me in the kitchen. And that's typically where that goes. And it gets, that word there, azer, in Hebrew, it means strong companion. It's strength. It's used in other places to reference the character of God. And so when God says, hey, here's your helpmate, God was saying is, I've given you this garden with incredible responsibility to enjoy it and take care of it, and I'm sending you a teammate. Not someone to serve you, but a teammate. But just like we talked about this earlier, coming back full circle, a team has different roles. A team with all point guards is not good. A team with all quarterbacks, that's not good. You actually need diversity of those unique roles. You need to complement each other. So God created men and women to be equal in many ways of dignity and value and worth, but also in our uniquenesses to complement as a teammate to make us better for what God put us on earth to do.
And accept those roles.
Embrace it, champion it. And this is the other thing I would say too as we wrap up is us as men, we're called to champion the heart of our wives, and I think real quick too, because we didn't get into a lot of the father piece of this, but I would say all this applies to being a spiritual leader with your kids. All those things we just talked about, feeding yourself, nurturing them. I would say bless your kids. Don't curse them. Don't speak over them. Don't say words where you are negatively shaping their identity, because the power of a father over a kid is significant. They receive their identity a lot through what the father says about them. And so watch your words, build them up. You can speak truth and challenge them, but don't coddle them, challenge them. They need that from you as a father, but they also need you to bless them and praise them, encourage them, build them up. I would say this too, probably one of the most important things we do as a leader, as husbands and as dads, is be present. Be present. Fight the urge to be distracted and gone and absent. Be present as much as you can. And when you're present, that means be fully present. Not just I'm physically in the room, but you're there emotionally, you're there spiritually, you're not disengaged, you're not distracted, you're there with them. It's interesting, my daughter's getting married here in just, a little over a month. And it's so cool. This will be a fun thing to end with. And, I've always thought, who's my daughter going to marry when she grows up? And also feared that.
Sure.
As a dad,
I got a daughter.
because, man, we're protective over our sons and especially our daughters, right? Like, dude, I've been oiling the shotgun since she was born, right?
Right. Show them your gun collection on first date.
Oh, yeah, 100%. That's mandatory. Open the safe. Enough said.
Take a look.
Mess with my daughter, you mess with me. So my daughter meets this amazing guy. His name's Isaiah. I'll just shout out to him. But he, great. I mean, amazing. Couldn't ask for a better man to pursue your daughter. Man, loves Jesus. He's an ER nurse. Played football at George Fox. Just total stud. Just all around. So they start dating, and he was so awesome. Super respects my daughter. Like, treats her so amazing. And is also strong with her, because women need a strong too. So you want that, but he just really takes care of her. Anyways, fast forward, they've been dating for over a year. We knew they were going to talk about marriage and, looking for rings and stuff. And so he sends a text to my wife and says, "Hey, can I take you guys out to dinner? I think you know what's coming." He wants to ask permission. And so we're driving to the restaurant to meet him. And my wife goes, "What are you going to say?" And I was like, "Well, I've got a few things kind of rehearsed in my mind." So we sit down, we're having dinner, and he goes, "Well, reason I want to get you guys together, I wanted to officially ask permission to marry your daughter." And this is literally what I told him. I wanted to have fun with it too.
Sure, of course.
He's great. We've had some great times together, so I knew I could do this. But I sat there quiet, and I said, Isaiah, I said, I always thought someday my daughter's going to marry some guy, and he might come and ask for permission, and I might have to look at him and say no.
And then just let it
sit for a sec.
Sit there.
And I said, there's only one way I'll ever give permission for another man. It's my girl, man. Mm-hmm. And I said it that's my girl. And I said, here's the criteria. The only way I'm going to ever give permission is he has to be a man that is passionate about his own faith in Jesus, with everything we talked about. Number 2, he's got to protect her, not just physically, emotionally, all that. 3, he's got to help provide and not be a deadbeat, but he's got to provide. And number 4, as I said, he's got to help pastor, be a spiritual leader. You got to help nurture her relationship, your relationship with God. And number 5, be present. I said, I won't give anybody permission to my daughter unless they got all 5 of those.
That's a good list.
And just sat there. And then I looked at him and said, "Bro, you got all these. You got all of these.
Got to make him a little nervous.
More.
So.
Yeah, and all more." I said, "Man, I would be more than honored to," and we have fun, enjoyed the dinner. But I think that little summary right there is kind of what is the role of a husband, role of a father is. You gotta be passionate in your own relationship. You gotta lead yourself before you lead others too. You gotta protect her. You gotta be someone who helps provide. You gotta someone that helps spiritually shepherd. And got to be present. If you can do those 5 things, man, not perfectly, but just that's what we're called to do. That's our role.
Awesome. Role acceptance. That's cool. We could have gone another 2 hours on that one easily. And we'll probably revisit a lot of these things as we often do if you listen often. But we do appreciate you always listening and taking time to listen and support us on Vertical Pursuit. Check out the website, verticalpursuit.org. My nephew was just in town. He's a pilot for Delta Airlines, and he took home the VP book. Oh, awesome. And I gave him a mug.
That's awesome.
And a hat.
Hey, get that merch out there.
There's merch on the website, right?
Yeah.
And on the app.
On the app. It's all there.
The Vertical Pursuit app. Go to that as well, and we will see you next time on Vertical Pursuit. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast, comment, or message us, and check out our website at verticalpursuit.org. Download the VP app and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.